as a comedy producer, you're the guardian of the joke. If a writer has written something and it's funny on the page, it was funny in the read through, your job is not to screw it up and kill that joke.
So today on Meet the Creators, we have a very exciting guest. His name is Philip Kampff. He's done so much stuff. If you've watched TV in Ireland in the last 10 years, 20 years even, you've absolutely seen something with his fingerprints on it. He's one of those people that just is incredibly creative, is always focused on making new ideas and having original content that Irish people can enjoy and selling that to the world. He's one of those people in Ireland now that's just creating stuff that is just head and shoulders above the rest. So yeah, I'm really excited to show you this interview with Philip Kampff. Enjoy.
Okay, great. I actually made a little intro, Philip. But this is
Okay,
I feel like I'm on Radio One here. It's
very
like
good.
it's as
You're
close like
Claire Byrne.
I yeah, yeah. I don't think I was talented as Claire Bird. Okay. So I'm here with Philip Kampff. He's a producer that owns Vision Independent Productions. You may know him from shows he's created like Operation Transformation, The Restaurant. He also made the Lyrics Board and many, many others. If you've watched RT or Virgin Media in the last 10 years, you've definitely seen his work. Now he's built a streaming platform to showcase Irish content called VipVidi, which is where you can watch Guarding Ireland. And thanks, Philip, for coming on and chatting.
No problem. Yeah, it's great to be here.
Yeah, I think it's so good. Like I've obviously done loads of work with you in the past as well now, and it's
You
so
have.
great to see kind of a lot of that building up to the sort of I suppose the VipVidi acquiring or buying or whatever you want to call it, guarding Ireland to showcase for on VipVidi.
Well, I think you're hard to say no to.
Yeah, I'm Wrigley.
So, no, so I do, well, look, I just think we need to find other outlets for comedy, particularly the comedy that you're doing at Newscheck, and like from when we were discussing, how do you go from short form to longer form to whatever, and so that's why I thought, well, look, let's give it a go, and I
Yeah,
also fundamentally what worked for me was just the level of writing, performance, and direction and delivery from Newscheck was really, really strong. So it was it was an easy decision. But
yeah,
I think the thing is that you know the world now at the moment is there's just absolutely so much content out there. And I think but so. And you sort of go, well, does the world need any more? And I suppose what we're trying to do is we're trying to say, well, look, here's something that's specifically Irish. Do you know what
yeah,
I mean?
yeah,
And because I think a lot of stuff at the moment, and even reading stuff in the newspapers over the weekend, there's a lot of stuff about, if you do a co-pro with a Belgian company and a German company and an
yeah,
English distributor, then you get the money to make. Everyone's trying to find ways to make, and there's no harm in it, ways to get the money in.
yeah,
But some things can get lost in the way of that. Do you know what I mean? And
yeah.
I think some things are particularly Irish, and I think guarding Ireland for me is particularly Irish, and
Amazing.
that's what I've said it to you 100 times. I love, like, the stuff I love is is the guy with the GA player, deleting them from the pulse system. I think it's uniquely Irish.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Yeah,
it's so interesting you say that, right? Because I mean, comedy has such a great lineage in Ireland, right? I mean, you've got the likes of Father Ted, and then you go on with the Republic of Telly, and you even got up to modern day, like Two Johnnies, that sort of thing. It's constantly reinventing itself and
yeah.
discovering itself. So where do you think it's headed, I suppose, into the future? Like we had the past of traditional broadcast that seems to have sort of gone by the wayside. Is streaming, VipVidi, is this the sort of future as you see it, particularly for hosting comedy, Irish comedy?
And I mean, we're just I suppose we're there just there. We can host anything. I think the big challenge is getting people to come to watch it.
Right.
Um, but I think if you look at the history of comedy in Ireland, it's been a tortuous one. I think the our we like to see in Ireland, like, we like to see sort of blood in our comedy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, like, I don't think I did some sitcoms at the BBC, and it's a completely different world over there. Like, culturally, it's very different.
Hmm.
Now, Father Ted was, very much, an Irish thing that went over but it was made over there. That was crucial. But I think a lot of the stuff that we wouldn't make that sort of Terry and June old, what we
Yeah,
saw. Now they're not being made anymore
yeah.
anyway, but there was this sort of British tradition of sitcom
Mm.
um, that just would never wash here because we liked our comedy much more hardcore
Mm.
and fundamentally someone needed to get punched. You know what I
Mm.
mean?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's why we tend to like satire much more. So
yeah,
things that like the type of things that Dermot Morgan was doing with Jerry Stambridge, which was the sort of scrap Saturday stuff, which was going after Charles Haughey week in, week out.
yeah,
That's the type of stuff I think resonates here
yeah,
more so than that sort of genteel comedy that was so big. Like I'm not even sure Only Fools and Horses, an Irish version of that would work here
yeah,
because we like it just we're not into that, you
yeah.
know. I think we need, but I think that's what I think is interesting with Guarding Ireland. I think it's sort of in a similar way to Father Ted. Like it's going at the church, but it's going at the church you're going at the guards, but you're going at the guards in a way with a level of affection as well. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
the absurdity of it is what
yeah.
makes it funny, you know?
Well, I think it's what's funny about that is in a weird way, we kind of know their position, right? There's a clarity
Yeah,
there, right? Like the way Father Ted, there's a bit of parallel in the way that Father Ted recognized the church was very powerful, right? They
that's right.
recognized that they had a position in society. We recognize that there's a position for the Gardaí in society.
Yeah. But also, yeah, but 9 times out of 10, what they're trying to do is really, really difficult. And the
Yeah,
people in it are sort of, which is classic sitcom. A sitcom is people trapped in a world they can't get out of, and they
yeah,
just keep going around and around and around. Like if you look at Cheers, no one ever really gets to leave the bar, you know? They might have a round storm out, but they're going to come back in for the
yeah,
next episode. And that's what a sitcom is. So they're
yeah,
sort of trapped in a world. And Father Ted was the perfect
mm,
version of that, where they were trapped on this island and they always dreamed of going to somewhere else, but they could never
yeah.
go anywhere
And
else. You know?
even in the last episode, they got their chance, right? They were like a dog chasing a car. They finally got the car. They got the chance to go to America, and Dermot left, got off the plane.
That's it. There you
Yeah,
go.
and
Yep.
it's interesting you say that. So there's a lot. I think when people sort of look at comedy, I think they sort of see it as very sort of blasé. Oh, anyone can be funny because obviously we're very funny. Do you have like a North Star when it comes to like creating kind of original content that sort of guides you? Do you have sort of is there something in when you spot an opportunity, you go, oh, that's going to work or that could work? Is there something that pushes you specifically that like other people might learn from?
I don't know. I mean, I remember when I like my background is like started off in radio, then I did sort of chat shows, and then I sort of I was always interested in comedy. And when I worked in young people's in RT 1,000 years ago. There was always sort of like we would do comedy sketches and stuff on Saturday morning telly, and so I had an interest, but I would be no expert in it. And then I out the again back in the day, the BBC used to list a load of jobs in the Guardian every Monday, and I was doing a chat show up in Northern Ireland, and I said, God, I'd like to do something different, and it said sitcom producer
Yeah,
required for the BBC, and it was just one of those, and I just
yeah,
applied for it, and it sort of surprised myself that I got it, and
yeah,
I entered into the world of sitcom. But I would say, I mean, looking back now, it's not a natural fit for me. I much prefer reality, or I much
mm,
prefer non-scripted. That's
yeah,
just my own thing. But the thing about comedy is that there's no escape. It's either funny or it isn't. Do you
yeah.
know what I mean?
Binary.
And whereas our shows can be good, little better, brilliant, right? But you can sort of hang around, and you always want it to be brilliant. But like comedy, it's either great or completely shite, right? It's not, that's it, right? There's no middle ground. So it's like so that's a tough one, you know? And
Hmm.
so you're going right. So but I can, I love, for me, I do like I liked Only Fools and Horses, you know?
Yeah,
Like I like a comedy that can have me laugh in 1 minute and then can have me crying, you know?
yeah. You
Because
like
and
you
I
like the
think
story, don't you?
yeah, it's story and character. And
Yeah,
that's why I was saying to you, I like, even with the Guarding Ireland, I like the characters that you're creating because they go beyond being guards, you know? And I
right.
think you can create a three-dimensional character that you laugh at, and but ultimately fundamental, and comedy characters are always deeply flawed. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you'll go with them, and then right at some point, a great writer will just momentarily turn it on its head, where it sort of becomes, something that you actually feel right here.
Yeah.
And I think that for me, that's great comedy.
Yeah, yeah. How do you like it's not fluke, I suppose, the amount of success you've had, right? So like you've obviously like Operation Transformation, massive project, the restaurant, massive project. When it comes to sort of, I suppose, the process, do you know when you think something's going to be a big hit, or do you feel it, or is it an instinctive thing, or like is there a moment in the process? Because obviously you've got pre-production, you've got just thinking of the idea, and then you start to, for me anyway, I find a lot of excitement in the casting process. So like people start to read scripts, and Damien, the superintendent, Damien Kearney, when he read the script, it just a light switch kind of went off in my head, going, "Oh, this guy's going to be a good character," and now I can start to
Yeah.
build more script. Do you think like whereabouts in your process, and then the edit, obviously, when you finish cutting it and you start showing people sort of offline, they start to react and have that sort of like excitement about it getting released. Where in the process do you sort of feel that you kind of make a hit?
Well, I think yeah, it's. I mean, all the from what we're all the time you're thinking about ideas, right? I mean, you're thinking about would that be a good idea, and so it's a bit like I would always say, like with the Beatles, they sort of wrote a song every day. Now, not every day was what they were writing a yesterday or let it be or whatever. But you have to, and I suppose so. You've got to be going constantly, sort of going at it and going, what about this? What about that? And like I would say. They can come from anywhere. But
Hmm.
sometimes you just hear something and you just instantly go, "That's a great idea." Like
Yeah.
it's like a joke. It's either funny or isn't. And sometimes you just go, "No, that's really, really good."
Yeah.
Now then, the challenge after that then is to execute it and be and protect it and keep it a great idea.
Mhm.
And so the things that can fight against that is that, you pitch it and then someone goes, I know you think the idea is, over to the right, but we'd like it over to the left. And you're going, well, that'd be a big mistake. When I said, so I think
Hmm.
you try and you have to protect it.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately it starts off with something that is, no, that's a good idea,
Yeah.
right? And I think quite often the good ideas are really, really simple, but really, really simple ideas are very, very hard to
Yeah.
come by. And also, then what happens is when they're simple, you've got to protect its simplicity, and also, it'll have depth to it. But then, the challenge is not to overcomplicate it. I was reading something about Michael Jackson and songwriting recently, and he kept saying, you know, don't get in the way of the song. And that sort of sticks with me, like if something's
Hmm.
like don't complicate it to the point where what you originally had
Hmm.
disappears. So,
Yeah.
and I remember Jeffrey Perkins, sadly no longer with us. He produced Father Ted, and he's the one that gave me the job in the BBC as a comedy producer. And he used to say, as a comedy producer, he said, you're the guardian of the joke, right?
Love
And
that.
that really, like, he said, like, if something, if a writer has written something and it's funny on the page, it was funny in the read through, your job is not to screw it up and kill that joke. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's really, and also that, I think that's our job. You get it. Like if someone has a great idea, a great comedy, the thing is don't get in the way of it, but try and enhance it. And I
Yeah.
think that's that's the hard thing to do, you
Totally
know?
agree. Totally agree. It's like trying to make a. I like it like there's like hoops, and you're basically trying to fire like an arrow through it, and you're trying to
Yeah,
keep it as. In other words, you're trying to get it from start to finish without hitting anything. In
yeah,
other, like blocking it. But I suppose that's really interesting because a lot of the people, particularly with Newscheck, like we have a huge amount of like comedy writers and performers that are starting out. Like they're kind of in their twenties. Are know that the sort of traditional broadcast route is probably not the best route, are trying to kind of find their places to where they can express themselves. So if you were starting out again, what would you be focusing your time on? Like you've had a massive journey, particularly the BBC, like a huge depth of experience early on in your career. Obviously the BBC is still huge, but if you were in Dublin or Ireland now and you were starting out, would you be focusing your time on, your an Instagram account? Would it be a
Absolutely, yeah.
vlog?
I think it's a great time now, you know. I genuinely do. I think the difficulty is how do you monetize it, which is the is but and therefore to be able to pay yourself. Do you know what I mean? So and you have to, pay your rent. Um but I think never before has there been a greater time to get your talent out there, you know?
Mm,
Um whereas if you think in the past, you know, you had sort of one route, and you sort of and that was to a broadcast. Well, there was another route. From comedy, there was always the great thing about comedy. There was always stand up, right? So you could go to an open mic spot and you could do your 5 minutes. You could go back week in, week out, and try and do it and improve, improve, improve. Um, for sketch comedy, it was more and more difficult. But sketch comedy, likewise, there was still a route with comedy where you could end up in Edinburgh and you could get spotted in Edinburgh, and then you would get your TV series, which was a good route, a good route. I think that the part of that that's fallen apart now is that where you get the TV series, it's sort of gone.
yeah.
But then again, you don't need it because you can sort of tour. But
Yeah.
I remember way back in the day, again, I was a producer on Nighthawks in RT, and we used to have a part of the Nighthawks thing was the basement, and stand-ups used to do the stand-up in the basement. And we came up with this idea where we would almost like do an open mic spot, right? So basically, we took over a hall in Sandymount, and we would say, because there was a whole load of new comedians, Kevin Gildea and people like that, and
Mm,
Barry Murphy and all, they were all sort of coming through, and and so we sort of felt actually we need to sort of create our own little open mic thing, and we did a comedy series based on the basement in Nighthawks. But the idea was every Tuesday or Wednesday, we'd have a hall in Sandymount, and the door was open, and anybody could come in
wow.
and just do stand up. And then if they, we'd sort of say, well, that's good. What about this? What about that? And then they come back. They could come back the next week, and then they get a spot on the basement.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really good initiative.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
remember people like Dylan Moran came. Dylan Moran used to do a two-hander with his girlfriend, and
Mm.
he came in, and I think at the time the suggestion might have been, "Have you ever thought of doing it on your own, Dylan?" Do you know what I mean? Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
sorry, but they would, but I think,
I
but
know
the
what you
good
mean.
thing about that was that, like, people coming in,
Yeah.
some people were coming, like Rose Henderson and people like that were doing sketches,
Yeah.
and we go, that's a great sketch. But basically, it was an open door. You could come in,
Mm.
and then and it was very cheap to do. Then, as part of Nighthawks, then we'd film them in the basement, and then they'd end up going
Yeah.
out as part of the Nighthawks show.
Yeah.
And so I think you need things like that.
It's funny. It's really flipped on its head. Like I think we were talking about this before about the rest is entertainment. They were talking about this on a podcast about how people develop into sort of get becoming financially viable through their art, right?
Yeah,
And they were just talking about it, how it's flipped on its head, and how essentially before you used to do live shows to get your TV show, which
that's
would
right. Yeah,
then
yeah.
be your kind of your entryway into the scene, and then you would make TV shows and you would make a lot of money, and it would sort of scale, and you'd syndicate it to all these different countries. All of that has kind of changed now, right? It's
Yeah.
you're kind of funny online via a TV show or via a sketch show or even just videos with the intention of selling out the Three Arena. And it sort of appears to have flipped on its head a little bit. So
But I think now that, like, your chance of being discovered on telly are less than being discovered on TikTok, you
yeah,
know?
yeah.
So you're much better going to where the audience is, you know?
Mm,
So the audience is on TikTok, the audience is on Instagram, and
yeah,
that's where you're going to be found, and that's where you can
yeah,
get a following.
yeah.
But I think it's the only problem is, having spoken to lots of influencers over the last 4 or 5 years, it becomes a very lonely road. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
also a desperate road, because you're trying to keep up your following and all of that sort of stuff. We're all involved in it. And that's why I think what you're doing at Newscheck is really good, that you're able to create a community,
Mm,
and that community can support each other and share, and out of that things will grow.
yeah.
And so so people can be doing their own stuff, but also they can come together, and then there can be a sort of
Yeah.
in that people saying, I really like what you did there,
Yeah.
or geez, maybe do a bit less of that, or have you
Yeah.
thought of bringing that character somewhere else,
Mm.
And I think if that you can do so much at home on your own, but you do need to interact with other people, and that's why back in the day, back when the International Bar was setting up with Mr. Trellis and all that gang that came out that sort of led to, pre-Father Ted, but it was the start of alternative comedy in Ireland.
Yeah.
Like the thing was very similar to what you're doing now. Like they would meet up. They
Mm.
would constantly be.
Yeah.
And what I always liked was like people like Paul Tyler and that they were, even though like they were never in competition with each other, like they all wanted to be obviously be the best, or
Yeah.
whatever. But they were very supportive of each other, which I thought was really, which is very different from television, where nobody supports anyone else.
Yeah, I mean, I said that regularly with people that come in. Like, not only are they very positive, but like they'll never be late. There'll never be any
Yeah,
drama. That it'll be very much we're here just to do this funny thing and get out. And I think we try to show a lot of respect with the actors because obviously we're starting out. We're a small little startup. We don't pay you these massive fees, right?
yeah,
So we'll get you in for like 90 minutes. And the way we liken it is it's like a contributor slot on 2FM. You get,
yeah,
you come in for 90 minutes, you do your bit and you get out again. And
yeah,
becomes way more of a busk then, as opposed to this massive show, right? So instead of this
yeah,
this thing where you need to, like what you're talking about, Belgium and American money and all these different people thrown in, it becomes way more of like a kind of a busk. Every day you come in, you do your little bit and you get out
yeah,
again. And there's hundreds of people on the books that come and go. Do you know that kind of way?
yeah.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, so it feels a little bit more like that. But I suppose I'll ask you one last thing, which is when
Well,
we
actually,
yeah
funny man, funny. I just cut you off that because
yeah
what should support that now is the Sound and Vision Fund from Commission them on, because
yeah
that is as valid as any broadcaster, like what you're doing, like by bringing people in, by getting them writing together, by shooting, by putting stuff out, you know, is as valid as any public service broadcaster, and I think
mm,
that's what needs it that I think that does need support,
yeah. But that's going to be up I mean if that's got to be something to consider in the future, right? Is no
Yeah,
longer can you have if the gatekeepers no longer exist per se, right? We're just calling them gatekeepers. They can't exist particularly with policy like that, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think the problem is there's in the traditional sort of setup, there's very few gatekeepers, and that's not healthy either,
Yeah.
So that's why I think there's this explosion of talent online, because
Yeah.
you can't hold it back,
No.
But I do think it needs to be encouraged in a way can where people can sort of essentially train. Do you know what I mean? Because you
Yeah.
have to go out, you have to go out and do it.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. You have to go out, you have to get up and do your 5 minutes. But also you have to get into, you've created a sort of a culture where people come in and write together,
Mm.
and I think that's really important.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the notion that you need to start somewhere. Like from what we've made, several of the actors have gotten very large jobs with drinks brands for
Yeah,
advertising. That new arts fund that kind of was piloted a few years ago. A couple of
yeah,
people got that.
brilliant.
And other people got full-time jobs in publishers that are front camera and behind camera. And what that is they send on their news check video and they
Yeah,
show them and go like, look, this is the kind of stuff I make. It's made to a really high level. It's like shot with
yeah,
a proper TV camera, so it feels like there's a team behind it, even if it's just
yeah,
me me doing all the
yeah,
jobs. But like it feels so. So they then go forward, and a lot of casting agents and producers will come up to me and go, "Oh, you're the person that's doing those things that so and
yeah.
so sent me." And what that does then is it helps us obviously because we're kind of in the scene to be doing stuff, but it helps every single one of them kind of say to themselves, "No, I am good. No, I am able to actually
Absolutely.
make
Yeah,
something."
yeah, yeah.
You know. But no,
But
yeah,
I genuinely think the level of the acting talent that you have and the writing talent is really strong,
mm. But
Really,
that's
yeah.
what the funny thing about that is I don't know. It's hard to even describe. but I said it once in a chat before, which is, do you know, like Jamaicans run really fast? Have you ever seen Cool Runnings?
Yeah,
Do you
yeah,
know
yeah,
you know
yeah,
the Cool Runnings? They go, oh,
yeah,
Jamaicans can't do bobsleigh. I feel like
yeah,
Irish people can do comedy. It's that level of it's got that inherent. Like we're inherently good at it, right? Like we
yeah.
have like everybody knows someone who's absolutely hilarious. So I find it not difficult at all to find comedians that can write and comedians that can play on screen because there's just like it I've never scraped the bottom of the barrel so far,
Right. Yeah.
which is amazing. So yeah.
I've done a lot of that.
No, I'm really excited. I hopefully now we get more there's more stuff with it biddy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Hopefully there's more support now for from I suppose government support and kind of industry support for
Yeah.
like streaming going forward. I do genuinely think that if we can make something that people pay and support a streaming platform like Bitbiddy, by just going onto it and checking out the stuff that's there, I think you can probably not resurrect, but reinvent the idea of commissioning things and having proper full
Absolutely.
shows.
Yeah. 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 I think
Yeah.
so. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
all right, Philip, that's great. Cool.
All
Well,
right.
sure. Thanks
Brilliant.
a million for the
Well, no,
chat.
thank you very much. And
Yeah.
thanks for guarding Ireland. It's really brilliant.
No worries.